this meeting to order. We'll go around and identify ourselves for the record. Julia, we'll start with you, ma'am.
Julia Tucker, Assembly Council.
Pete Peterson, Assembly.
Tim Steele.
Big Train Assembly.
Erica McConnell, Office of Economic and Community Development.
And Bill Falsey, Municipal Attorney.
Okay.
Toby Gray Jackson on the phone.
And Forrest is walking in as we speak. Forrest, welcome everybody here. We've got about half an hour, so we'll get moving on.
Okay.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. I will go through this as fast as possible. So, how did we get where we are? We recall that voters voted to legalize recreational marijuana in November of 14. There was a period of time while the state developed regulations which were adopted in February of this year. The municipality has approved a number of ordinances relating to marijuana, including no public consumption, where clarifying that our smoking prohibitions include smoking marijuana as well as tobacco. 4 ordinances relating to criminal statutes and penalties, our land use regulations, our licensing regulations, and our retail sales tax administration, collection, and enforcement. So a overview of these regulations, just as a refresher for the Assembly. There are 4 types of commercial marijuana facilities. Your cultivation facility, which includes at the state level, what we consider a cultivation facility includes the limited cultivation, which at the state level there's a limited license which is limited to 500 square feet of grow operations, or their standard cultivation, which is an unlimited amount of grow operation. Your manufacturing facility at the state level, again, they have this split into 2, a general manufacturing license and a concentrate only license, which doesn't actually, they just extract the THC out of the marijuana. They don't create edibles or tinctures and that sorts of thing. Your testing facility and your retail store. All of these types of facilities require at the municipal level both a license and a special land use permit. The Assembly has the authority, and only the Assembly has the authority to authorize this license and the special land use permit, and these are done through one single resolution brought before the Assembly. So the resolution has 2 sections, one approving the license, one approving the special land use permit. And applicants must have a complete state of Alaska application before they can begin the municipal application process. And the state is looking at cultivation and testing applications first in order to have cultivation start out so that they can get started. It takes 3 to 4 months to produce, to get through one life cycle of marijuana plant in order to create products to sell. So they are looking first at cultivation and testing before they start addressing retail and manufacturing licenses. So all the ones that are initially coming to the municipality are also cultivation and testing. Details of the land use regulations, just to remind you, these are only allowed in our I-1, I-2, and B3 districts in the Anchorage Bowl and the kind of corresponding districts in Girdwood and the Chugach Eagle River area. There is a required separation from protected land uses, the distance of which varies by the location and the type of protected use. They have to be in a permanent structure. They can't be in a vehicle, trailer, mobile food unit, connex, or temporary structure. They cannot be on a lot with a residential use unless that residential use is a caretaker's apartment. They can't be in an establishment with a liquor license, and retail stores have to have a neighborhood responsibility plan. Those are kind of the bones of the land use regulations.
Now, the growing doesn't have to have that.
No, the growing does not have to have a neighborhood responsibility plan. That is only for the retail store. The licensing overview, our licensing regulations are based on the state licensing regulations. If you recall, we wanted to issue a mini license so that we had more enforcement ability to deal with any sort of problem operator rather than relying on the state to have to deal with it. The regulations address issues like testing, reporting, transportation, health safety, handler's permits, which is similar to a server's card for alcohol. It's a permit that you have to have if you're involved in the marijuana industry as an employee, and you'll be trained on the regulations and things like that. Public access, security, video surveillance, and waste disposal. So the approval process. An applicant, as I mentioned earlier, has to begin the state of Alaska application procedure, and The state then evaluates the application for completeness, and once the state has determined the application to be complete, both the applicant and the municipality receive notice that the application is complete. At this time, the clerk's office sends a protest to the state for all applications. And I want to highlight, this is a difference from alcohol. The assembly does not issue the protest. The clerk's office does it automatically, so you will not be seeing a resolution that is issuing a
Says
protest.
protest at the top, and we'll see what comes up.
Right, you will not see any protests. You will, like right now, generally you'll see alcohol establishments twice. You'll see an AR with the protest and an AR with the land use approval. In this situation, for marijuana, you're gonna see one thing, and that's gonna be the combined license and land use approval AR. So the assembly, the clerk's office automatically issues the protest, and then through this AR license and land use resolution, you'll be indicating to the clerk that once your conditions are fulfilled, the clerk can lift the protest. So that is a significant difference. The applicant has to hold a community meeting. I do want to clarify that the timing of this community meeting doesn't relate to the state application, so they can hold their municipal community meeting before their state application, after. Those two don't necessarily relate to each other, but the community meeting has to happen before they apply to the city, and the state application has to be complete before they apply to the city. And they provide notice to residents and property owners within 500 feet of their proposed location for that community meeting. And again, ought to be held at a community council meeting, but for sometimes there are valid reasons why that can't happen. Okay, so once those things are done, the state has said it's complete, they've held their community meeting, they submit their application to the planning department. This is one application for both the license and the special land use permit. This application is routed to agencies and community councils for review. It is posted through our City View portal, so the public is able to access it, and any members of the public who have signed up for e-alerts for marijuana would get an alert if it's in the area that they've signed up for. The planning department will mail notice of public hearing to residents and property owners within 500 feet of the proposed location and the community council. This mailing happens 21 days before the public hearing is scheduled. The planning and the clerk's office collaborate on drafting the assembly resolution with a section on the proposed license conditions, which comes from the clerk's office, and a section on the proposed land use conditions, which comes from the planning department. The assembly will hold a public hearing, make a decision. Once, assuming assembly approval, the applicant will have to fulfill the conditions placed on the licensing section before the clerk's office can lift the protest to the state. They do not have to complete the conditions on the special land use permit before the protest can be lifted, but they do have to complete the conditions on both the license and the special land use permit before they can actually begin to operate. So the applicant feels like they've addressed all of the conditions in both the license and the land use permit. They request an inspection from the municipality. An inspection team made up of code enforcement, fire, in some situations the health department, not in all situations, building safety and APD will go out and perform the inspection. Assuming it's a successful inspection, the applicant will receive their license and their land use permit and may begin operating.
Eric, we've got a question for you, Forrest.
Thank you. So, Eric, I have a question on this is for the clerk's office, on the timing of the protest. Did they, I guess my question is, when did they issue that protest? Because you said we aren't informed of it.
So as soon as the state lets the city know that the application is complete at the state level is when the clerk's office issues the protest.
So in this case, it probably happened 3 weeks ago, a month ago? Do you know when? 6 weeks ago?
I have that information, but not right here.
So I guess my question is, so they issued the protest, which means that the state application was complete, right? And now we've got on the agenda 6 weeks later, but we only have 5 days or so to review the detailed packets. Is that right? I mean, I haven't seen the detailed applications, and if we wanted to approve them, or let's say we wanted to talk more and have a work session, we bump it off another month or so. But it seems like we've added a month to this processing time than we didn't really need to. If we were able to get their application and be able to review it, at the moment that the clerk's office submitted the protest, then we could potentially cut a month or so off this application time. Is that right?
Let me ask the clerk, Barbara?
Actually, Amanda is prepared to answer that question.
And I'll-
And another comment.
So just 2 points to the chair. One of the ways that the assembly wrote the ordinance was to allow the clerk's office to immediately address the protests so that we could begin the municipal process. And although the clerk's office and planning do receive the applications about a month before, the big content of that application is also the staff report, which the planning department works on. So yes, we could forward the application should members want to see that, but a large component of what you are seeing right now in your binders is the application with the staff report, which is the planning department's review of the application.
So there are a lot of materials that are developed after you submit that protest. Okay.
Mr. Peterson?
I'm sorry, could I just respond to Mr. Dunbar as well? If you wanted to see the application without the staff report stuff earlier, there are several ways that could be made to happen, which, I can touch base with you later if you want, but there are ways that could be done
Well,
easily.
it might end up being sort of a moot point because this is our first time going through this. And
It's a new process, and we're gonna perfect as we go there.
Right, and so I just, it really depends on if we are going to be habitually putting these off. When it comes up on Tuesday, we don't know what's going to happen. But if it turns out that almost every time when this comes up, for one reason or another, we're going to push it off for a month or to schedule a work session or whatever, then I think I would want to see those materials earlier, have everybody see those materials earlier. If that isn't the case, and we review them, and then the next week we approve them, then that's not necessary.
I think part of the thing is, this just deals with growing.
Right.
When we get into retailers, we're gonna have another problem with the address this issue. Because I can see a lot of people wanting to come and comment, I don't have time, so you need to postpone it.
Yeah.
We need to figure out the process, that's why we're here today. Let's get started with the agricultural one. Pete and then Tim. Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe there's a 60-day limit. We have to approve this or it's automatically approved. Is that correct?
No, we have 60 days to protest to the state, and if we don't submit a protest within that 60 days, then the state doesn't have to, they don't have to take into account the municipalities'
So they could issue the license
concerns.
without our...
But we are
Since
protesting.
we have our own license, people still could not operate if they have this, just because they have the state license, they also need the local license.
I guess that's I'm sorry. That's
Tim and then.
Yeah, it just seems to me that this is gonna be kicking around for a long time before we get to some officials, because you've gotta have a community action plan, and it has to go to community council.
Doesn't have to go to community council, they can have a neighborhood community meeting.
So the applicant can select 5 people from the neighborhood and say, here's what we're doing.
I've got community
No, they
council,
have to
they
mail.
people show up.
Yeah,
They have to mail to the 5,000.
within a certain radius, the same type of thing. There's just a lot of back and forth here that seems like, it's gonna be fun to sort of try and coordinate all this. Going back and forth to the state, going back and forth to the neighborhood perhaps, and all the agencies, yes, ma'am.
Through the chair, if I
Yes, ma'am.
respond. Although I think that there is some level of back and forth, the fact that there's 2 licenses before the body at Tuesday's meeting, I think that we have worked through these things. So we are moving forward, and I'm not sure if Eric has gotten to this point in the presentation, but there's quite a few of these licenses that are heading through before the body that have gone through this process. And this is process we've streamlined based on our experiences with liquor licenses. So some of the challenges that we've identified over the years working with liquor licenses, we met the clerk's office and the planning department and worked together to streamline that process. So where we had a lot of duplicative efforts, we have erased those in this process. And I think that because you're just seeing it a little bit more sort of behind the veil, actually what's happening, it does seem like it's a lot of back and forth. But I think when you're dealing with things that you need to make sure meets all these specific requirements, you do have that.
It's gonna be interesting.
Of course.
So I apologize, I wasn't part of the process of setting up this regulatory, I wasn't on the body yet, so some of these questions might seem a little basic, but if they cannot operate without the special land use permit and within the municipality without a municipal license, what's the purpose of protesting the state license? Even if they had the state license, it would be ineffectual without our special land use permit, correct?
That's correct.
I think as a courtesy to the state, to notify them that we are working through our process on our end, they have that communication from us.
And then they can also see through the AR of the issues that the local government has
I'll get you
concerns
a
with on any
second.
particular license. Because when we lift the protest, we send the AR to the state, and so the Marijuana Control Board has an opportunity to see what conditions the local government has placed on that particular applicant, so what are the concerns with that particular applicant.
Okay.
Barbara?
Through the chair, I wanted to let the members know that Mr. Trainee specifically requested this work session.
Yes, I did.
He knew that these marijuana licenses were gonna be in front of the assembly on Tuesday, and he wanted a review and, a review of each of these applications so that you can ask those questions or figure out what those questions are. And then maybe staff can even get back to you before Tuesday to answer any questions that you have. So we'll continue to do this summer and fall until we have the process down right and the members are satisfied with the process.
And it's a new process, and thank you so much for your office working on this, Barbara. Erica, you want to finish this up? I'm sorry.
No problem. So the current status is we have 16 complete state applications within the municipality of Anchorage. 11 of those 16 have submitted applications to the municipality. Again, remember, these are cultivation and testing because that is where the state is starting. 9 cultivation, 2 testing. 2 of these are up next week. 1 of them is scheduled for your 8-9 meeting. 1 is scheduled for 8-23. 5 are scheduled for 9-13. Both of the testing applications will be up on September 13th. And 2 are scheduled for 9/27, and that's as far out as we have scheduled at this point. What we might see in the future, so part of the application at the state level is providing just a 1-page public notice to the local government saying, heads up, we've submitted a state application. They submit it both to the local government and the community council. So based on what we've received by that, and these numbers include the 16 state applications that have been deemed complete, we're looking at a total of 46 potential establishments, 46 potential applicants who have said, I'm interested, I've initiated a state application to open a facility within the Anchorage Bowl. So in terms of what is coming up on Tuesday, you again have 2 cultivation applications. AR 2016-197 is Dream Green Farms. This is proposed for a warehouse on Porcupine Drive in Mountain View. The affiliates plan to
Your call cannot be
add a manufacturing facility at this location in the future, so that would be a second license and special land use permit that you would see at this location. The zoning is I-1, as you can see from the map. I don't know how well you can see it on your small sheets, but this is in Mountain View. There isn't any residential near it. This is the Glen Square Mall over here. It's right in the middle of an industrial area, so it's well situated. Actually, the municipal manager and I did a tour of about 14 of our 16 applicants, and the majority of them were quite separated from residential areas, so it seems like they had found good locations. So the recommendation for this particular application is approval with conditions. And then the second one is AR 2016-198, Arctic Herbery. This is located on the east side of Arctic Boulevard, a couple of blocks south of Raspberry Road. The owner anticipates adding a retail facility, and actually his retail application just yesterday was designated complete by the state. That was the first retail facility application we've seen complete. The zoning in this location is I-1. This is one of the few situations where we have seen where it is near a residential area, you can see that there's residential directly across Arctic Boulevard on the west side. The recommendation is approval with conditions. One, kind of thing I wanna give you a heads up about is the, deadline for the planning department to get these, packets into PACE is only 1 day after the public hearing notices are mailed. So the staff is not getting the benefit of anybody who's submitting comments based on the public hearing notice. So what we are working on is collecting any public comment that we get, after it's gone into PACE and having the clerk's office provide it to you through an AIM on the addenda. But it is kind of a way the process doesn't work very well based on, certain deadlines where the staff doesn't necessarily hear all of the public comment in time to evaluate it and potentially recommend, conditions. And that is the case with Arctic Herbery, that I'm aware of one public comment which, is not from somebody in the residential neighborhood, but, is not addressed in the staff packet because it actually came in the same day that this was entered into PACE. So we're trying to figure out how to deal with that issue.
Yeah, the timing is so tight, and there's so many hurdles to go over that, it's going to be real confusing, or it's going to, it's going to bog down, because there are so many hurdles and back and forth, and groups that have to do this, and one group have a problem and they're slowing down.
And we don't really wanna add time because that,
I know.
prevents the.
But you have to have adequate time to do the analysis,
Yeah.
and then you have to then get it out to those people that are dealing with that, and it just makes it pretty bulky.
Any questions? Others, others, any members, yes, or?
Well, I'm gonna read this over the weekend, and I'm sure it's in here, but just quickly, could you summarize what conditions you guys are recommending for these two establishments?
So the, conditions for both of them are, no, I don't even have those. My recollection is that the conditions are pretty standard, with the exception, thank you very much. With the exception that on Dream Green Farms, one or more of the licensees or affiliates does owe past due taxes, fees, or fines, so they will need to make good on that before they can open, but that shouldn't be hopefully, difficult. And then there was the need to establish, they needed to do some upgrades required by municipal light and power. So if you recall,
Right, we had that
cultivation
discussion.
facilities have to have a utility letter that either the power is sufficient or can be made sufficient. So in this situation, the answer was the power can be made sufficient, but we're not gonna require them to spend the money to do the upgrades until they actually have their approval. So they'll need to, address that, and then they need to either establish non-conforming rights for landscaping or provide the required landscaping. Those are the only non-standard conditions on, Dream Green Farms, and the other conditions are kind of boilerplate things that we would put on every, application. And for Arctic Herbery, I don't think they had anything that wasn't standard.
Nothing, if the Herbery one goes to retail, then it's gonna be a parking requirement?
Yes, and
So-
you'll see that as a separate case.
So I wanna make sure we're making the parking requirements sufficient if they do retail.
And, I mean, we've made the parking requirements similar to other types of retail facilities. We don't really know whether, since we don't have any existing facilities, we haven't been able to do any parking studies to know whether the, ratio that we set is actually going to be sufficient, so.
Just one thing, I'd like to make sure we do the handicap parking, because
Of
we
course.
hear from a lot of people, they use marijuana for handicap purposes.
Yes, definitely.
So we'll have to just make sure we've got it available. Julia, ma'am?
Just looking over the conditions, when you're referencing in this resolution, that for instance, in number 1 under section 2, when you're referring to as modified by this ordinance?
We fixed that in, our template.
Okay, so that carries on in the, under each section, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Which item code? I'm sorry.
so, in the first condition, the licensing for agents and
It's
employees
page
shall conform to the.
529, towards the back.
Yeah, and then what I'm looking at is line 25, on line 7.
Yeah, we just noticed that, we
14
have made that correction in our template that we all did board.
I wasn't sure if maybe it meant it would conform to the ordinance, A and C.
I'm hoping that somebody is preparing the GIS for locations of facilities around the whole municipality, and that we can add to as they upgrade, change, because it's gonna quickly become difficult for people to make decisions. And also, one of the layers needs to be, those prohibited facilities and setbacks.
What I'd like to see here too is with alcohol, we get a printout that shows us how close they are to other facilities, different types in the area. I'd like the same thing for marijuana.
It is required if you look on, I don't know if I have the same thing here, but page 7 of 79, there is a requirement for a listing of all marijuana licenses within 1,000 feet of the subject property. However, since these are the first licenses, at this time, there are none, but as time goes on, you'll see that.
Other, anything else? Barbara, anything from you?
Nothing from me, Mr. Chair, thank you, but if you wanna check with Amanda and Mandy from the clerk's office.
Amanda and Mandy? And Mandy especially, because you're gonna be the one that's on the phone line. Our licensing clerk.
We need to have 24-hour phone.
Anything from the two of you guys?
At this point, everything's going fairly smoothly,
Okay.
so.
Mr. Falls, anything from you?
Now this time, nothing.
Anything else, Erica? Thank you.
Moving right along.
Well, we're right along, it's 11:44, this ends in 1 minute, so meeting's over.